Good evening, everyone. My name is Jason Evans, and it is a great honor to be with you tonight as the founding dean of the College of Food Innovation and Technology at Johnson & Wales University. While I certainly wish we could all be together in person, I'm grateful for all of the JWU students, administrators, faculty, staff, alumni, the industry leaders, and other distinguished guests who have joined us this evening for the inaugural Food Innovation and Technology Symposium, to hear from our esteemed panelists about the challenges facing the food and hospitality industries and what the future might hold. This year's symposium theme is Taking Stock, Culinarians Poised to Affect Change. That we live in the globe's largest economy, filled with unimaginable opportunities for innovation, growth, and wealth, is entirely a result of centuries of learning how to more efficiently and more effectively get nutritious food to consumers. Truly, people who understand food and how to solve problems inherent in the food system are poised to change the world. Of course, COVID has created crushing economic realities for food and beverage businesses dependent on the social dimension of eating and drinking. With varying restrictions across the country on social gathering, businesses that were not able to pivot to socially distanced, outdoor, takeout, or delivery operations suffered significant losses, or at worst, permanently ceased operations. Those able to adapt to the pandemic did so entirely through innovation. New front of house operations, new menus better suited to takeout and delivery, new facility layouts, and novel revenue streams like packaged products or make-at-home meal kits. Truly, for these businesses, innovation has saved the day. We're in a time of transition, and JWU is in a time of transition. We're expanding on our world-renowned culinary education with an interdisciplinary approach to food and its impact on people, industries, and the world. My vision for CFIT is that it be the premier training ground and think tank for the globe's food innovators, food entrepreneurs, and food thinkers. There's a lot of work ahead, but JWU's storied and undeniable place in the culinary and food world over the last 50 years gives us an unmatched starting point. It's now my great pleasure to introduce our Assistant Dean of Culinary Relations and Special Projects, Chef TJ Deladon. TJ is a phenomenal chef and has played a significant role in making the College of Food Innovation and Technology what it is. He has worked tirelessly to make tonight happen, and I can't thank him enough for all that he does for our faculty and students. Chef TJ?
Thank you, Dr. Evans. We appreciate your support and your leadership as we navigate these uncharted waters together and prepare to come out stronger on the other side. We certainly appreciate you. I'm coming to you all tonight from the Food Innovation and Design Lab, a hallmark lab right here on our Providence campus. I would be remiss if I didn't also acknowledge our faculty, staff, students, especially alumni and distinguished guests that are with us this evening. This promises to be a night full of useful reflection and innovative forward thinking. The inaugural 2021 Food Innovation and Technology Symposium, Taking Stock of Our Industry, is a gathering of like minds poised to affect change. The FIT Symposium is slated to be an annual event which brings together innovators, restaurateurs, entrepreneurs, and others to explore problem solving in the food space. FIT's goal is to inspire food professionals across all disciplines to affect change by taking those experiences from this symposium back to their communities. In the future, when we are able to come together in person, attendees will have the chance to explore these topics through keynotes, presentations, demonstrations, and hands-on workshops featuring renowned industry leaders. We are honored and fortunate to have two of the most innovative and passionate people that I have the pleasure of knowing here with us tonight as keynote speakers, chefs Emeril Lagasse and our own Sanchez. If you don't mind, I'd like to share a few words about the both of them. Chef, restaurateur, cookbook author, TV personality, humanitarian. These are all ways to describe Chef Lagasse. And personally, I am so proud to call him a friend. He's a member of the JWU class of 1978 and was awarded an honorary doctorate by the university in 1990. Emeril is always looking for ways to give back and support the industry he loves so much. In 2002, he established the Emeril Lagasse Foundation to support children's education programs that inspire and mentor young people through the culinary arts, nutrition, healthy eating, and important life skills. To date, the foundation has distributed $14 million in grants benefiting children's charities in New Orleans, Las Vegas, and the Gulf Coast. In 2013, he was named the Humanitarian of the Year by the James Beard Foundation for his dedicated efforts to further the culinary arts in America, as well as his philanthropic work supporting children's educational programs through the foundation. That is so incredibly well-deserved, Chef. I cannot thank you enough for how much you've done for Johnson & Wales University and for me personally. We are so proud to have your son, EJ, here with us as a freshman this year. And we cannot wait to see him spread his wings and carry on the legacy you surely built. Our own Sanchez is an award-winning TV chef, TV personality, author, and philanthropist. He has starred in multiple Food Network shows and most notably a judge on Chopped and Chopped Jr. He was the host of Cooking Channel's Emmy-nominated series Taco Trip and has appeared on numerous other shows, just that little one called Master Chef. You may have heard of that. Like Emeril, Chef Sanchez is known for giving back. In 2016, he founded the Aaron Sanchez Scholarship Fund, an initiative empowering aspiring chefs from the Latin community. The foundation provides recipients with full culinary scholarships to schools in New York City and ongoing mentorship. I'm also proud to say that everyone attended Johnson & Wales University and has inspired me greatly. Chefs, I think the three of us can come to the consensus that our mothers had a very, very important role in have incredible influence over our cooking and have really drummed up our passion for food. That's one thing that we all share together. Chef Sanchez, we actually share a very similar story that the both of us actually early on in our careers worked for Chef Douglas Rodriguez, you in New York City and me in Philadelphia. That proved to be very transformational for both of us. Both of these men have been incredible Northern Lights in my career and in my life, and I am glad to have the chance to publicly thank you. Over the last year, our industries have encountered unprecedented challenges. There is no doubt about it. We know the hardships many have faced in trying to keep their doors open and businesses afloat. What we don't hear about as often are the creative, innovative ways people in the food space have addressed challenges and in many cases positioned the industry to emerge even stronger. There's a quote and an expression used by Sir Winston Churchill that said, "Never let good crisis go to waste." I think that's pretty fitting for the times in which we're living. We're all working to identify the call to action for our industry, and it's happening as we speak. The bill has been passed into law. We are all waiting with bated breath to see the significant changes in the ways restaurants and businesses alike will do business. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, ladies and gentlemen. There's without a doubt this pendulum will shift. Chefs, we are all eager to hear what you've experienced and what you think the future holds for the food and beverage and hospitality industries. Without further ado, from right behind me in the Food Innovation Design Lab right here on our Providence campus at Johnson & Wales University, it is my pleasure and our honor to welcome Chefs Emeril Lagasse and Aaron Sanchez.
Thank you, Chef TJ.
Thank you, Chef.
You know, it's been really great not only being back here at the Providence campus, but to see just this incredible facility here, Food Innovation and Technology Center here. You all should be very, very proud, each and every one of you. It's been great spending some time in Providence. It's been great checking out the restaurant scene, particularly a colleague that will be on our panel tonight from Persimmon, Champe, who's a great chef and a graduate. But it's been really a wonderful experience seeing Providence starting to come alive. Don't you think, Arun?
Absolutely. And to see the growth exponentially, as you can see, there's so much belief in the restaurant industry here. We have this unbelievable pool of talent from Johnson & Wales. And just over this past couple of days, for us to be able to see the restaurant see burgeoning and being successful and coming out there and really showing what they do best and making people happy. And we really seen that on a very intimate level over this weekend. So we're ecstatic to be here. So we thank Johnson Wales. Great to visit with my dear friend and brother, Emeril, and see what you guys are up to. So thank you.
You know, words can't explain what the past year has done in our industry. Restaurant closings, people unemployed, front of the house, back of the house, side of the house. It's been a real challenge. And I think what the challenge has been is to have in the beginning time to think about what we were doing, time to think about how we can do it better. And I think that's a lot about what we're going to discuss, Arun and I, tonight, as our industry. Look, we can't take it back. We can't change anything. All we can do is move it forward. So those of you out there, put on your forward brace, because it's going to be a great night.
Yeah. And I think the idea of when you're in times of uncertainty, this is the time to really work on your foundation and have faith. Every obstacle creates opportunity, and this is what we're facing right now. So this should be an optimistic time, not one of uncertainty or fear. This is what it's about right now.
Look, I've been like a lot of you out there in the same situation where I thought we were going to close, and I thought we were going to be out of business. And a lot of hard decisions had to be made during these times. People decisions, financial decisions. But presently, we have 4 restaurants open. We began in Las Vegas at 25%. New Orleans has been, as Arun will tell you, a big challenge. And on the Gulf Coast, in the panhandle of Florida, Florida's a little bit different. It's a little bit open. It's a little bit more progressive. I think the governor has done an amazing job. I think what it comes down to is the crisis that we're facing, the big crisis that we're facing in our industry right now is the shortage of labor,
Yeah.
of staff, front of the house, back of the house. We got to get that moving. And that's why it's, we got to start opening. And that's why it's great to be here at Johnson Wales and to see these young culinarians. I wish they could just drop out of the sky, and they will. But that seems to be the big challenge right now.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the labor shortage is going to be an issue that we're going to have to face. Obviously because of systems in place and aids that have been given to people, maybe the incentive to come back to work might not be there right now. But I urge everybody to support their local restaurants, as you should. The independent restaurant community employs more people secondary only to the federal government. And that's not even counting the tentacles that it casts between linen people, farmers, wine people, fishermen, meat purveyors. It goes very deep. And there's ways that you can support those local restaurants. And right now, there's people like the IRC, the Independent Restaurant Coalition, are having a direct dialogue with government to try to make sure we get the proper funding. A bill was just passed and started to get through at $26 billion. It's going to help independent restaurants hopefully get out, erase some debt, make sure that you're paying their staff and getting this back on track. So keep yourself informed. I think that's really important right now during this time. Make sure you're reading enough, making sure you know where we're currently at with different vehicles that are in place to aid restaurants.
I think for me and my organization, I think that it was really a lot of time to think about how we were operating and why we were operating the way that we were. And I think now business is different. The fabric is different. The labor pool is different. The customer base and expectations are different. So I think you need to just pull back the reins a little bit and think about, well, where am I? And certainly, where do I want to go? And how am I going to get there? Because I think that we have to all think smarter, brighter. It's not the same the way that we were running businesses before this pandemic.
I agree. And one thing also, we were talking about this at lunch earlier. By the way, EJ, Emeril's son, cooked a fantastic lunch here on campus. All the team behind Johnson & Wales did a phenomenal job. The administrators, the chefs, the teachers, everybody's been so welcoming. And I just can't say enough and endorse Johnson & Wales enough. Me tocaron mi corazón. But one of the things that we were talking about today was now is an opportunity to take stock and evaluate your workforce. Because of circumstances, we've had to shrink our work pool within our restaurants. Now it's a good time to really see, what are those positions? What are they doing? How are they being most effective? Do we have too many people perhaps in one particular part of the restaurant? This is a really good time to take an inventory of your staff and see who's dedicated, see who's invested in the future, and who wants to grow with you. And from a cost perspective to a morale perspective, it's really important to do that right now.
Well, and I also think, you know, in today's time of what we're faced, economics are extremely important. So the way that we looked at, you know, maybe costing menus, or the way that we looked at our labor force and how we were paying people, et cetera, all has to be reconfigured, in my opinion, because it's not the same. You know, are you doing delivery? Are you doing pickup? I think the biggest message that I have for my chefs is, and general managers is, you know, are we costing things out properly? Because it is a whole different arena right now.
Absolutely.
Food is expensive, labor is expensive, labor is short. The customer's expectations maybe have even grown more because they've been trapped and locked up at home for so long, and cooking at home and making their own home expectations higher when they do get out. And there's been people that haven't been out in a year.
Yeah.
That I've talked to. So I think it's a great time, like you said, Arun, that we have to look at the game, and we have to see how we're playing the game and how we're going to do it better.
Absolutely. And also, like, small stuff. Look, I'm a big fan of the Uber Eats, the DoorDashes of the world. I like that. But there's something simple you can do to support your local restaurant. Call the restaurant directly. Order from them. That way they receive more revenue directly. Things like that. Go in there and make that effort and pick it up and have that little connection with your favorite local restaurant. Those are small ways you can really assist, you know, and it makes a lot of sense. And check in with them. Say, hey, I know the pandemic's happened. I know this is an issue. When are you guys planning to open up to 75%, 50%, whatever it is? And that kind of connection with your local restaurants will go a long way.
Listen, we have respect for people, and we have respect for our staff and our customers. So the whole social distancing, the whole mask protection, we are continually, and I'm speaking where I'm spending a good majority of the time in our Florida restaurant in the Panhandle, Emeril's Coastal. It's important to still have those, you know, those important things in play. People feel safe to come to our restaurants because we are practicing the right thing, and we are working hard, and it's tough, with the staff. I can't control, you know, the staff where, you know, after hours where they're going. All we can do is try to put those things in place and implement them to be a better place and a safe place for our customers. Very important.
TJ, sorry, we just kind of went off, but you have another question, perhaps?
We might have lost TJ.
I think that's what I'm saying. TJ, you there?
Hey, guys,
We just started rolling.
I am still here. No, that's fantastic. And that's really, that's really what we want to hear. It's the conversation from two just amazing chefs and towers, really towers in the industry, right? What, when the money starts to come in to this relief fund, what can we, what's 6 months down the road look like? What does, just kind of a knee jerk, what does it look like? What is takeout still, a thing? Do restaurants need to think about that? Do we need to have separate areas for pickup so we're not disturbing the diners inside the restaurant, things like that? And what's 6 months look like? Because it's going to be here, before Christmas will be here before we know it. So what do you think about that, guys?
Well, I think, the business leaders that I have had the pleasure of working with over the last couple of months, couple of weeks, mostly in New Orleans and in Florida. I think in Louisiana, I think in New Orleans particularly, we've had trying times. We're still having trying times. There were a lot of regulations. And so with that, also, doesn't stimulate the environment. So I think that if we continue to keep encouraging people to get vaccinated, if we can get the government to continue their support to provide communities to get vaccinated, to make it easy to get vaccinated, that's one of the big things. I think that we're going to see the end of the third quarter, fourth quarter I think is going to change if we can continue to stay on this path. I say that for us in New Orleans.
Yep.
Florida's a different animal. It's busy, it's controlled for the most part. It's respectful. Las Vegas is different. Las Vegas is finally starting to really come back. We went to 75%. There's traffic now beginning in the hotels and the casinos and on the footpath. So that's a whole different animal. And I think every environment is a little bit different. So I think what we need to do is zero in on what that environment is and where we are and say to ourselves, okay, how is this formula going to work? Because the formula's changed. At least it's changed in my organization.
Yeah.
The amount of employees, the amount of how we're doing business, payroll, food cost, food quality is an example. This is a great opportunity, and we've taken opportunity of really elevating the food quality because a lot of these people, like Arun was talking about earlier, the fishermen, the cheesemakers, the farmers, they had nothing also. So they were idle. So now they're back and they're proud of what they're growing, what they're fishing for, what they're catching.
Yep.
The cheese that they're producing. It's an excellent time to elevate the standards of what you're doing. At least I speak for my organization, myself.
And I agree. I mean, a good question. What does 6 months look like down the road? I'll tell you, I mean, I own a gas station that I'm going to turn into this cool little sort of gastropub situation. And it's going to be literally 70% outdoors, 30% indoors. And maybe this was some divine intervention of knowing what was going to happen. But I think the future is people are going to want to be outside regardless, because I think it's going to make people feel safe as we move forward. So I would say, I think a lot of people are going to start looking for more outdoor spaces to coincide with their indoor capacity as well.
I agree.
I think people are just going to want that inherently, that are maybe not as trustworthy and whatever. So I think that's going to be a really big reality as we move forward here. And then again, being able to have all your business practices forward and show people that you're making those extra efforts to keep your staff and your customers safe. And I think it's a tragedy that restaurant workers are not in a priority list of getting vaccinated. We have a lot of contact with people on a daily basis, and our industry should have vaccinations as a priority as far as the workforce, essential workforce.
I don't understand why the hospitality industry and the university industry, schools in general, why is it not a priority about vaccination? I mean, it's not rocket science, right? It's a very common sense, at least for me, it's a very common sense kind of thing about when you're with a lot of people, those people should be the ones that are being taken care of, as the doctors, as the nurses, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I couldn't agree with Arun more about this outdoor seating. Now, everywhere's different. You know, if you're in the Northeast, if you're in the South, the Southwest, if you're out West, everybody has a different circumstance. We were with a great colleague over the weekend, Chef McDonald, and his organization. They're ready. They got heaters, they got tents. They're ready to put it in place. And I think that you have to think way above what's happening these days because of just that, just outdoor seating. I know at Coastal, we had a lot of wasted space, fire pits, you know, people, we totally redid the patio. We totally redid, we put a cooling system, we put heating lamps. I mean, I think you're absolutely right. People want that option
in case
of being out or being in.
Exactly. And the idea of the vaccinations and doing these measures of having outdoor seating is creating confidence in our environment, creating confidence.
More so than ever.
Exactly.
More so than ever.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I have a question came in. What Las Vegas has reopened buffets. Do you think that buffets will survive COVID?
I don't see that right now. I don't see there are not many or any buffets open right now in the hotel casinos. People still are freaked out about that distancing and about oh, maybe, you know, John touched this or, you know, Sarah touched this and I'm not comfortable in that. I think it's going to be a while, TJ, Chef, that people are going to start to warm up to that again. I think that they still are a little bit distant about, I want to have my own zone.
I hear you loud and clear, Chef. Another fantastic question. What did supply chain and manufacturing disruptions that happened at the beginning of the pandemic say about the food system? That's great. And for restaurateurs, did it change the role of local, shorter supply chains? Or are we seeing, and that's a fantastic question, that because we, even at the school, when we reopened in July, we were having a very tough time finding things, right? The supply chain was significantly disrupted. You have anything to say about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, here's the deal. The idea of like farm to table and buying local, that's not a novelty. It's your job as a chef. It's been happening since the beginning of time. So when you say I'm farm to table, you should be doing that regardless. So, but as far as getting bulk items and getting product to your respective outlets, look, everything's up. Emeril mentioned it earlier. Prices are up with everything. When I started cooking 25 years ago and buying skirt steak, it was 99 cents a pound, you know, and then you can see where it's at now. So I think it's been disrupted just because the demand was not there. A lot of producers had to stop with maybe their production. And now that things are starting to rev up, I think it's going to come back more in line with the norm.
Other than a couple of novelty items like lobster and oysters, I think that most chefs, at least that I talk to, not only in my organization, are like trying to buy as much local, regionally produced, grown, fished product as possible. I think there's still a little uncertainty about the distance. I mean,
exactly.
the days back when you would buy
buying the
stuff
truck,
from,
buying the
buy
truck.
stuff from Europe, or fish from Europe. I mean, I think that it's still happening, but I don't think it's happening as much. I think that people are really focused in locally and in their region
Yep.
when it comes to food products today.
Yep, I agree.
All right.
It goes back to Chef TJ, it goes back to like, okay, I really want to buy Dover sole, but why can't I buy flounder that's local?
Sure,
It's tasty as well.
Right.
Yeah.
sure. Um, destination dining post-COVID. Any thoughts on that?
Well, I think you have to be educated on what some of the restrictions are. Look, I tell a lot of the youth, the best ways that you can get inspired and how you want to chase your dream. Make a list of mentors and people that you want to work with. Write them a letter, not an email. Write them a letter and say, look, I want to engage you. I want to learn from you. I'll do whatever it takes. But a big part of the other advice I give is travel and being immersed in another culture and understand that culture through the food. And now it's been challenged.
Yeah, I think the days right now in today's environment, the days of like, okay, you want to learn about French food, well, go to France. You want to learn because go to Italy. That's not happening right now. A lot of those places are still really shut down. I know I had a colleague that went to Portugal last week and shut down. There's nothing open. There's no restaurants open. You basically, have the keys to your car and can
Hope
go
for
to
the
the
best.
grocery store and that's it. So a lot of the students that I was in contact with today, it's very simple. How about reading? Read. I think that you can understand maybe not so much the culture, but you can certainly understand the food reading. If you're interested in French food, then read about it and really read. And like Arun said, get some good mentors and read about what he or she is doing.
Yeah, and get yourself in there. But I agree. Destination cooking is because, especially now with our Johnson and Wales young students, I think it takes a long time to develop your style and understand your calling culturally about what's your food identity, right? And a big part of that is traveling and going to seek out these places and falling in love with them. And that option is not there right now. So to Chef Emeril's point, get yourself as well read as you can, watch some YouTube videos, try to get there. And when things are loosened up, go visit.
Then it's a different, then it's a different story. When it opens up, then it'll be a different story.
All right. Any last thoughts? We have about 4 minutes here. Anything else to the students, to the alumni, to the restaurateurs, to the business owners, to the folks on the call? Is there anything you want to leave them with these last 4 minutes? And then we'll jump over into our panel discussion.
I'll start real quickly. I just have a quick piece of advice. Make sure that you cultivate your love for food in whatever direction you want. Right now, you're in a beautiful position to have the foundation of the best culinary education in the world, hands down, in my opinion. So you have that at your fingertips. Get all the basics, the foundation skill work that you need done, and then choose your path in the food industry. You don't have to be a restaurant chef necessarily. You can be a personal chef. You can be a food stylist. You can be a recipe developer, a caterer. There's so many different areas that you can cultivate your love for food. Don't feel the pressure to have to necessarily be what Emeril and I have done all our lives, is be restaurant chefs.
I think to add to that, I think that knowledge is power. And I think getting up and saying to yourself, oh, I got to go to school, is a waste of time. You shouldn't be wasting your time. Time is too valuable. If you're not learning something every day, you're wasting your time. So it's like building a house. You have to have a solid foundation. Use the university as a solid foundation and then build layer by layer, like you're building a house, step by step. into where the goal that you want to achieve, whatever that is. Like Arun said, to be a food stylist, you want to be a private chef, you want to be a restaurant chef, a hotel chef. Don't waste your time.
Well said, Chef.
Absolutely incredible, chefs. I cannot thank you enough. We covered a ton in that 30 minutes, and I can't tell you how appreciative we are. There's a lot of questions popping up, and I hope that we can all answer them. Maybe we can all circle and we can get some notes out to some attendees. Tons of great questions. Thank you all for participating in this section of the symposium. We're going to continue and build on this conversation with a very distinguished panel, led by a chef who's played an instrumental role in this inaugural FIT Symposium through his coordination and his development skills. I really want to take a moment to introduce a colleague of mine, one of our esteemed faculty members, Chef Matthew Britt. Thanks, Chef.
Thank you, TJ, and thank you, Chef Lagasse, Sanchez, for your insight and forward thinking during that last 30 minutes. I think that we all can take something out of that and apply it to our own individual situation. It's now my pleasure to welcome our panelists for the night, some of the most respected and influential people in the industry. We're going to drill down on some of the issues that we talked about in the last 30 minutes. And I'm going to ask our panelists to share their personal experiences and lessons learned during the pandemic, and obviously to look forward as to how we rebound and how we make our industry stronger. First, Lindsay Tusk is the co-owner and creative director for Quince, which is 3 Michelin stars, Catania and Verjus, and the founder of Feed the Future. Paul Kahan is a partner and executive chef at One Off Hospitality and a James Beard Award winner, multi-James Beard Award winner. And Chef Champe Speidel is the chef proprietor of Persimmon right here in Providence, Rhode Island. He's a Johnson & Wales graduate from 2000, as well as an honorary doctorate recipient in 2016. During this panel, members of the audience, people listening in, are encouraged to ask questions using the Q&A feature. We're going to dedicate some time at the end to answering those questions from our panelists. We have a lot to cover this evening, so I'll welcome our panelists on camera and we'll get started. Welcome. Thank you, chefs, for joining us. I really appreciate you all taking the time. I know we're kind of spanning the country here, so time zones being what they are, this is fantastic. Thank you again. As I said, we have a lot to cover, so I want to jump right into it. Chef Speidel, Champ, a few years back, you received an honorary doctorate at Johnson & Wales. I was present for that, and I remember one of the underlying messages you talked about during your speech was how important it was for chefs, especially aspiring chefs, to plan and to have planning embedded into their ethos. No one on this panel could have ever thought or planned for what happened this past year and the ripple effect it would have on our industry. Knowing that planning was so important to you in 2016, how did planning help you pivot, react to COVID?
First of all, thanks for allowing me to be in attendance to this panel. This is quite an honor. It's a wonderful group of chefs and professionals, so thank you very much. Obviously, no one could plan for COVID, but that's why we plan. We plan for that proverbial rainy day. And, you know, we went through a pretty tough financial crisis in 2007 and 8, and that taught us to really, you know, watch your spending, watch your food costs, watch your labor costs, watch all your costs. I do the books at the restaurant. I'm not an accountant, but I just do the books. So each week I pay attention to that. So we're already minding the book, so to speak. We're already trying to save. We're always trying to plan for a rainy day, what could happen. I'm still scared, and I don't know if people are going to come back the next week. You know, we can have a great Saturday night, but I don't know if they'll be back on Tuesday or next Saturday. And that's what we dealt with when we, you know, our first incarnation of the restaurant was in Bristol, Rhode Island, and it was very, very small. So now we're much bigger, and I still have those same fears. Are they going to come back? So we basically stuck to our plan, our initial plan, and our initial plan is to always, keep enough in the bank to cover an emergency, to cover a shutdown. COVID is obviously completely different, but we pivoted. When we were shut down for 12 weeks, we started selling our sauce like a lot of people have done. We sell our pasta sauce. So it was my wife Lisa's idea, and we marketed it, and we sold big sales 1 day a week, and it was great. You would do a big night, pay some bills, and you keep moving forward. And then once we got the green light to reopen in June, we weren't behind. We didn't owe everybody a ton of money. We kept up to date on our mortgage. We kept up to date on, the electricity and pretty much every other payment that we had to cover, because we didn't want to come back. And we were all optimistic in July that we were going to be able to come back. And we weren't foreseeing, obviously, the second sort of surge. But we came back like we had just had a great 3-month vacation. So my goal with COVID and our plan all along was just to keep the train rolling, keep going, and do what we've always done. And that's to mind the shop, never get too far ahead of ourselves with our spending, and always be ready for that rainy day.
You touched upon so many important little notes there that we're going to unpack, because I think that there was a lot within that answer that I think we can all speak to, which I think is really important. Lindsay, I want to turn to you real fast because, Chef, you mentioned adapting persimmon. You had to change or adapt an empire. And Chef Paul, you're on this as well. So I'm going to let both of you guys maybe respond to this. But Lindsay, as you adapted, you had to change not only one business model, but multiple, most importantly, Quince. And it's not really easy to pivot a multi-Michelin star restaurant on the fly. What changes did you make, and how did the different iterations look? Because, from Quince to Verjus to, they're all sort of different. How did you react to each situation, and what did that look like?
Hello, and thank you, Johnson & Wales, for the invitation, and thank you all for those who are tuning in. It was, the 3 restaurants had 3 really different journeys in the last year. Quince probably had the most, I don't want to say volatile, but the most kind of erratic path through this. We essentially moved the restaurant. We took it outside of San Francisco. We're really lucky that we've got a farm about 45 minutes north of the city in a really small town called Bolinas. And we've been in partnership with a farm for over 5 years now. So we decided it was time to take the restaurant to the farm. And so we actually set Quince up pretty much in a field, in a greenhouse, in a packing shed that had no running water, no bathrooms, no commercial kitchen, no oven. But somehow we made it happen. It was very DIY. We bootstrapped it. And let's see, that was probably, we moved Quince to the farm in June, and we continued through the summer and well into the fall with the farm series, which was lunches and dinners over the weekends in the country. And then kind of the rain started, and we had to contend with the fires in Northern California. There was a lot of obstacles. So once the weather could have turned on us, we then moved Quince one more time to Napa Valley, to the Caneros region, and have set up shop in collaboration with really good friends of ours, Christina and Lee Hudson at Hudson Ranch. So this weekend actually is the last weekend at Hudson Ranch, and we'll be moving Quince back to the city after not operating in the city for a year. So learned a lot. Logistically, it was really tough. but it was nice to be outside, and it was especially enriching to be at the farm. The team did a really great job, and I think the team actually really enjoyed being at the farm and being outside. So that's kind of story number one. Cotonia took a much more predictable path in that it pivoted to product, it pivoted to takeout, delivery, and then we set up a really large outdoor structure comparable to the number of seats that we had inside of the Cotonia dining room. And whether that structure is permanent or not, it still kind of remains to be seen. And then Verjus is not operating at the moment as a restaurant. Throughout the course of the pandemic, we turned it into a grocery store, essentially. It was already a wine shop. And so then we just expanded kind of the provisions and the pantry items, staples, a lot of house-made products, and ran it as an essential business and a weekly farmers market, kind of coined the, or debuted the Jackson Square Farmers Market, which is the neighborhood that we're in. So really three very, very different stories, but rewarding in their own ways, to be honest with you. It certainly forced our hand to do a lot of things that we would not have normally done, that I think will kind of live past the pandemic.
Thank you for sharing that. And I think that it'll be interesting to see, and we can talk about this a little bit later, how many of these adaptations are going to be a permanent sort of structure. But if I can just kind of take a jump from the West Coast down to out to Chicago, where Chef Kahan is joining us. Chef, again, an empire of restaurants, just amazing eateries. What innovations did you bring to the table that maybe you had planned, or as Chef Speidel said, maybe that you had it in the back of your mind for a rainy day, or what just came out of like bare necessity, sort of like embracing challenges?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first thing that's notable in the case of our company is we had 12 properties, and we went into a mode where we analyzed our entire company, everything that might be a massive amount of work for very little profit, restaurants that were loss leaders in the group, restaurants that do very well, restaurants where we own real estate and others where we don't. And I think we decided that we needed to be lean and mean, and I think we still do. I don't really, I read in the paper today that and I hope this isn't the case, but positivity rates went up in 27 states in America this week. And so this is really, the pandemic's really not something to mess around with. So the first thing we did was, sadly, we closed our flagship restaurant, Blackbird, which was in its 23rd year, won a whole bunch of Michelin stars, et cetera, et cetera. We own the real estate. And we actually pivoted that facility into a facility where we staged national shipping for a brand that we created called One Off at Home. So we offer a whole bunch of experiences from our different restaurants. We decided to do it on our own because we have the manpower, as opposed to using a shipping service, more control over that. But that was number one. We had another restaurant called Cafe Kencal, which was relatively new, and in a neighborhood where it was being completely ripped up. When the opportunity to do outdoor dining came up, there was no sidewalk to do outdoor dining. And so we looked at the numbers there and decided to close that restaurant permanently. And then, furthermore, I guess when you look at our company, we had built two big expensive restaurants with a high amount of debt and high rent. And so we just looked at the entire structure of our company. We negotiated we did a lot of stuff that I didn't sign up to do as a chef. We negotiated with our landlords and with our banks for rent deferment. And that put us in a really good place. I guess as far as things that we created that have been very successful, that are driving a ton of revenue in our company, I'm happy to say we created something that we call our Supper Club series. Chicago has a really large surrounding area around the metropolitan area, tons of suburbs. And so currently we're doing supper clubs in 10 different suburbs. And basically it's a subscription series where you sign up for one meal a month for a week for a family of 4. We take those meals to a drop-off point in that suburb. We have drop-off times. At those drop-offs, we provide bottled cocktails. We provide wines for people to purchase. We provide cookbooks, all kinds of add-ons to sort of build the check, if you will. So the Supper Club series has been well received, and I think the biggest ones are about 250 meals per drop, so sort of between about 90 and 250 meals per drop. That's been really good. Like I talked about earlier, we're leaning heavily on national shipping, and that's been very successful. We started a Culinary Heroes program, and I'm proud to say that Chef Emeril is the next culinary hero that will be shipping a meal of his around the country for a month. It's delicious. I just finished sort of tweaking the nuts and bolts on it. So that's going to be really great. And then, boy, what else? It goes on and on and on. I've done a whole series of cooking classes for my cookbooks. We've really leaned on all of our culinary team in regards to every special event, every holiday that you can imagine, doing special meals from multiple different restaurants. And then I guess, beyond that, we've played within the rules. We run incredibly safe facilities, and we've just been, working within the constraints of what the city of Chicago allows us to do. So we do have a couple concepts that have really large outdoor patios, and we've done well there. But yeah, it's been a really incredible ride, and again, something that I really didn't sign up for, but a lot of lessons learned and a lot of things that I'm sure we'll continue to implement moving forward for our restaurant group.
Thank you for that. And there's a lot there, and I want to dive a little bit deeper into it. And I think that one of the reasons that all the members of this panel and the restaurants that did find some level of success, because I know in some of your restaurants, Paul, that you increased your sales, as you mentioned, because of some of the pivots and the changes that you made. So no better than chefs who have to pivot on their feet on the daily to kind of embrace this challenge. But I want to talk, because there was a couple mentions there about things that everyone did in the wake of the pandemic and how they adapted. I think that there was some, if there's a silver lining to any of this, there's things that we will carry on post-pandemic. That could be outdoor dining, or I love the increase in the emergence of at-home cooking meals. And I'm glad you mentioned the one-off home culinary series, because it's just so fortuitous that Chef Emeril is sitting like 2 rooms next to me, and it's just like on your website, it's right there, and it's just so connected. Food is so small. And Lindsay, I'll direct this to you first. What's gonna stay? What came out of COVID that it's almost like you hit yourself in the head and you're like, why didn't we do this before? And obviously that's not what you do, but what's gonna stay as part of the Quince and Co company moving forward?
It's hard to say, because I think all of it is the response to COVID is also very regional, depending on the city, depending on the climate. I think for San Francisco, which I think has had the longest lockdown of any city in the country, and has been very conservative. The dining public has also been, equally conservative. I think I would say outdoor dining is here to stay. And outdoor dining was not a big aspect of restaurant operations in San Francisco. But I believe the city inaugurated a shared spaces program, which allowed restaurants to take over sidewalks and parking spaces. And I believe that they're going to make that a permanent feature, a permanent program. I think they're going to have to try to figure out how to get back their parking meter revenue, but that will be negotiated, I think, at some point, and all the associated parking tickets that they're not getting now. But we'll figure that out. But I think outdoor dining is here to stay in San Francisco. I think Paul mentioned, batch cocktails. I think a loosening of alcohol prohibitions and laws and allowing for cocktails to be sold from a retail platform is probably here to stay. I think chef prepared foods, I think that the public has gotten a taste of chef prepared foods in the comfort of their own home. So whether it be meal kits or something similar to what Paul was referencing, or just a singular product, kind of the best in show of, your tomato sauce or something that the restaurant has really become known for, the pivoting to product and to, if you can, expand it to kind of e-commerce, I think is another stream of revenue. I think restaurants, if they can diversify their revenue streams, so it encompasses whether it be takeout, delivery, retail, e-commerce, they're going to find themselves in a stronger position than just relying on guests coming to them, whether it be sitting in the dining rooms outside or inside.
Yeah, I'm so happy to hear that those things are, I know in Mass, we're working on some level of shared space as well, just because Chicago, it's San Francisco, those are all tight cities, so it's hard to imagine. And we'll fight the parking ticket fight another day. Chef Paul, I read an article a while back where you mentioned that you do feel like we are going to bounce back. And you kind of related it to how the restaurant industry in New York bounced back after the September 11th attacks. And it's this sense of community, everyone coming together. You've kind of led a similar charge in Chicago. And we already kind of identified that food is big, but also strangely small in the same way. How important has your community been outside of your particular group in supporting this navigating of the storm?
I'll say that we're a pretty tightly knit community in Chicago, and I think from the get-go, the community has been hugely important. My business partner Donnie is on calls every week with Lindsay and the IRC, and I was on early calls with the group that started that, and it just flew way over my head where they were going. I had my hands on a lot of different things, but I think the entire community across the country came together. I was on a call where they were talking about where are we going to get the money to make sure that the restaurant industry has lobbyists on the Hill to address these problems. It was that early on, and there were several organizations that stepped up, including James Beard, including some of the credit card companies that actually put those lobbyists on the Hill. And I think we're going to reap, a couple months from now, hopefully, we're going to reap some of the benefits from that. I think we've already reaped benefits from it in regard to the paycheck protection plan and the first round and the second round. In Chicago, I can speak for myself. We had a great group of chefs that really provided emotional support for each other. Chefs that work for larger groups provided information for smaller chefs and minority chefs in our city that might not have access to the same information that we do. So we had several different platforms going of information sharing. But for me, just the mental aspect of it, working in this industry for 35 years, I think I've been a professional chef now, and sort of having the rug pulled out from under me, never closed a restaurant, never had any difficulties to speak of, all success. And in a matter of weeks, that all changed. And so, speaking with Rick Bayless, how he's addressing things, his perspective, a mentor of mine, was just amazing. And so, Chicago is good. We're really civil with each other. I think all the chefs love each other and love supporting each other. That's about it, I guess.
Thank you for sharing that. In Chicago, it's amazing that there's such a tight-knit community in such a big city. And you were even talking nationally. If I can take a minute, because like Chicago, like it's big, I can't not pay attention to the smallest state, which is represented here by Chef Speidel. You've always been a part of that tight-knit community in Rhode Island. Can you share any similar stories about how the Rhode Island and sort of Massachusetts, New England community has come together? Oh, you're on mute, Chef.
Not really, unfortunately. I feel like, it was, we all, had different ideas about how to come back. Each restaurant was different, and everyone sort of, every restaurant for themselves. And I think we all did what we had to do, and a lot of us, put our head down and got back to work. And we did what we always do, and we kept pushing forward. There was never at least I wasn't part of any large chats or calls or initiatives to help ourselves. We do have great representation. I think Dale Venturini, who lobbies on behalf, in the state of Rhode Island for restaurants, has done a wonderful job. Who's really worked with the governor, our former governor Raimondo, who listened and did as much as she could to not only keep the public safe and to listen to science, but she listened to Dale and her concerns for restaurants and food related businesses. And so if there was a community, it was her. She just really spoke on behalf of all of us and also asked questions. Again, we just kept plugging along, and anything we could do for another restaurant we would. But some are still not open indoors. Some are. We're open indoors and outdoors, and kind of what we were talking about earlier. I think necessity is the mother of invention, and we had always wanted to do outdoor dining. We have a wonderful corner space, but we never did, and this just sort of pushed us in that direction. And we never had a viable to-go program. We thought people who took our stuff to go were weird. So we put it all together, and we're thrilled. And shame on us for not doing that. And it's caused us again to push our sauce program forward and get that going, and so we're working on that. So I hope that answers your question, but I have to give a lot of the credit, as I said earlier, to our lobbyists, to our state lobbyists, to keep the restaurant train rolling.
No, you absolutely answered it, but by doing so, you actually kind of brought on, not a negative, but like a very sort of thing that we don't want to talk about, in the fact that there were people that didn't survive this. And Lindsay, I'll direct this to you. I know the restaurant industry, has 15 million people employed by it. 11 million are employed by independent restaurants. And we've thrown out organizations like the Independent Restaurant Coalition, which I want to talk about later. A large number of them didn't make it. And that's just because of restrictions and because of government ordinances and just the nature of our business. How did you pivot to minimize the impact on your staff? Because I know everyone on this call employs a good number of people. How did you handle that weight, and how did you react to making sure fewer people felt it than necessary, that had to?
Yeah, kind of maybe a two-part answer to that. I think a lot of the restaurants that unfortunately closed probably had a lot to do with their leases, and if they were able to negotiate with their landlords. I think if landlords were, saw themselves as partners in this kind of tumultuous period, then I think restaurants had a really good chance of surviving. So I think it has a lot to do with the commercial real estate market as to some restaurants that went under, sadly. I think the impact on jobs and the impact on employees, which I think was the second part of your question, was the issue that dominated the early part of the pandemic, the first maybe 3-4 months of the pandemic for us. Paul, I think, employs a lot more people than we do, but we had about 200 people on the payroll, on March 16th, 2020. And there were just a lot of really difficult decisions that had to be made about furloughing people, terminating people, and then an equally difficult conversation around healthcare. And it seemed unthinkable to cancel people's healthcare coverage and medical insurance in the middle of a pandemic, even if we were furloughing them. So that was the early period. There was just a lot of fear and a lot of trepidation around those issues. And we were lucky to have a very kind of supportive community in San Francisco, and we started a 501c3 called Feed the Future. And I had no idea how difficult it was to start a 501c3. For those of you out there who have done it, can appreciate how difficult it is to work with the IRS, especially in the middle of a national crisis, because they kind of assume maybe some dubious kind of motivations. But we were able to launch it and to fund people's healthcare for about 5 months beyond kind of, even if they were furloughed, or if they had remained with us. And moreover, we were able to pay, give out grants if employees that were terminated or furloughed weren't able to, were not eligible for unemployment benefits. Undocumented workers being one category. And then at Quince, we had a good amount of students or interns on J1 visas that were not eligible for unemployment benefits. And a lot of them got recalled back to their countries. And then a lot of them that could stay had no means of making any income. So we were able to financially support that group of employees as well. And now it's set up. Now it's a real thing, and we'll continue to look to fundraise for Feed the Future. And it really does provide direct aid to restaurant workers and to farmers. The farming story in Northern California is a little bit different when you talk about the disruption in the supply chain. We actually found that a lot of the small farmers actually did really well because most people were shopping at farmers markets. So the ones that had already established relationships and farm stands were doing great, frankly. And then we tried to help any small farms that did not have relationships already set up at their local farmers markets. So we gave direct grants to help that supply chain, to loosen that up, to make that a little bit more elastic, and make introductions, and created some networks that provided some business or entrepreneurial skills for some small farmers that all of a sudden had to really pivot because they weren't selling to restaurants anymore and they had to go direct to consumer. So Feed the Future, we're actually really quite proud of it. And I know that it's not something that would have actually happened if it wasn't for the pandemic. So one silver lining.
I'm so happy you brought up Feed the Future because it's such an amazing project, and I want everyone who's listening to check it out. It's feedthefuture.org, correct?
Yeah, not .gov. Sorry, there's like a government program, but yeah.
But it targeted like healthcare, and these are some really big like topics. And before the pandemic, there had been a shift in the industry to address some of the more long living problematic elements of our industry, and that could be gender equality or racism or wage inequality. Paul, what other areas did the pandemic sort of turn up in its wake that maybe should have been addressed earlier, and now because of it, as Lindsay, you mentioned, the silver lining might be sort of at the forefront of what we talk about in the near future?
Well, I mean, for me, wage is a big one, and fair wage specifically. I think back to 20 years ago, sitting down with a business partner and talking about, cooks working 12 or 14 hours, and, the service team rolls in and, does a little bit of work and, walks out with $600 or $700 for the night. And the cooks don't make anything close to that. So and he just said, he calls me Pablo. He said, Pablo, that's just the way it is, buddy. And I said, it doesn't have to be that way. And so I think the pandemic really, was very, I think the social justice movement was a definite result of the pandemic. And I think it brings forth so many issues. I believe at present that the legislation has passed where kitchen employees can be tipped, so you can create a fair structure for your entire restaurant. It's really interesting. We moved early on to create even tipping across the board in the front of the house between servers and back waiters and everyone. And it really interesting response, both positive and negative, as you can understand. But it really has driven a great team culture in our restaurants. People working more closely together. People not feeling because they're a back waiter that they, I guess it, in people's minds now, if they aspire to being a server, they feel that they can do it because everyone's part of the team. So for me, that's one of the biggest things, equal tipping. But furthermore, I feel like we've been, we've had our backs up against the wall for a long time in regards to what we charge for food and what people expect to pay for food. We're a very protein heavy culture. We own a butcher shop and an organic bread bakery in Chicago. And I think this is a real opportunity for people to understand that good food does cost a lot more, and for us to charge a lot more for that food. And definitely a result that I think will be long-standing. And I feel like the fallout of the pandemic will be felt long after if we don't, live and breathe those ideas, because you're just not going to be able to survive. I mean, the cost of everything has shot through the roof, and we're charging for it in our restaurants, I'm proud to say. So for me, those are the two big ones.
No, it's so important. And I just think it's, Americans for so long have been inundated with this idea that food should be cheap. And I think it's definitely a cultural thing, but I agree with you in the sense that good food does cost more. And I think that as a restaurant industry, we should charge more. Chef Speidel, Champe, I mean, how will your customer base react to that? Because I feel like we all feel our food is worth more money. How do you feel about that? And what other areas do you feel like should be addressed because of COVID or even before?
I have to agree with Chef Paul fully in that, I do think wage and the cost of food are going to be addressed. And, sometimes, I'm going to shoot myself for saying this, but sometimes I wish there was a union where they just almost set the prices, where the public knew, all right, this is how much cooks in front of the house make, and this is how much food costs, and this is what the price is. We don't seem to balk at any other industry. We don't balk at the price of healthcare or construction or the price of an automobile. We might haggle a little bit, but when it's a $5 sandwich, we all freak out. It used to be $3.99, and that's frustrating because we cost our food out, and we have our little formula, and we try to do the best we can. But I don't know why we continually have this sense of guilt if I change the steak from 32 to 33. It took me 5 years to change the price of foie gras, but it took a week for the price of foie gras to go up $5. And so it's just, this has all taught us to slow down and look at what we're doing. And labor is one of the biggest. And I think that is a good thing. We saw the potential for a nationwide minimum wage hike to $15 an hour. And at first I balked in that, how do we reward people who've been with us a long time? We can't suddenly go from one and then to the other on a huge increase like that. But we pay people. That's our goal now, is to pay people what they're worth. And as Paul noted, not to expect them to work 15 hours a day. And 7 days a week or 6 days a week, they have to see some sort of light at the end of the tunnel. We've cut our week to 4 days, and then we do once a month a brunch on Sunday. So when we have to work that 5th day now, we're all like, oh, geez, man, it's a long week. And we've learned to really enjoy that. Then I thought, what if we did 4 days and brunch on Sunday, and that way we have half the day Sunday and Monday, Tuesday off. But then I've got 2 small kids, and I'm like, I don't need to do that. Why don't we see what 4 days is like? Can we make our money in that? It's that thinking. I could be in 3 months or 6 months right back to 5 days and working everybody, 90 hours a week. But I think this pause, and I keep saying pause, does make us rethink our models after all these years. And Paul said, hey, that's just how it is. And he's right. It doesn't have to be like that. It shouldn't be like that. We can certainly do better. And now we can really think about it, because I think, as Chef Emeril said earlier, we have a labor shortage. And I think these kids are getting smart, and they're saying, I don't want to work like that. I don't want to live like that. And so we do have to do better.
No, I think that's just a great takeaway. And, we want to create a better work-life balance in our restaurants. And that's very difficult, because people have always wanted to pay less for food, and we have to work people more to get the result. And that goes to the margins being so slim. But there is work being done to improve the internal elements of our business. And I think that's a credit not only to everyone on this panel, but also to those making those changes in industry. But I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, while we're doing big changes and we're fighting the good fight internally, recently we've had some external components that have really been sort of hurtful for us. And, I'm speaking specifically, and this is a very sensitive subject, to the recent hate crimes against the African American, Asian American, Pacific Islander communities. I know, Paul, you mentioned the social justice component. I read an Eater article, I'm not sure if you guys have been familiar with this recently, where chefs are now encouraging their employees, especially those of Asian descent, to travel in packs to avoid being attacked. Is there a message that we can share to those listening about how hate really has no place in food? And Lindsay, if I can start with you, I know it's a heavy question, but if there's a way you can just sort of maybe help inspire those listening to understand that we are moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing that it would have to be, thank you for the question, but it is amazing that it would need to be explained, really. I mean, you put it quite nicely. There's no tolerance for it. There's no place for it anywhere, whether it be in restaurants, out, whatever the industry may be. I think, hearing people's stories, certainly this year, doing a lot of listening, evaluating, all our roles, I think, in it, is probably a very good place to start. We have, in the restaurants, we have, San Francisco is a very kind of, although they've taken very kind of conservative, it's been a very conservative town during COVID. By its very nature, it's a very progressive political town. So they've it's with a very, very large Asian American community in San Francisco, and also in the South Bay. So everyone is really, I think there's a real heightened vigilance. Certainly there is around security at the restaurants, and making employees feel safe. We too have said something quite similar, that if anybody needed help coming and going from work or transportation, or if they ever felt that they were vulnerable, to speak up, and we would address that and take whatever course of action that we could to support employees. Yeah, I mean, I just, we are, I think Restaurants sometimes tend to shy away from politics because, because we are catering to the dining public and there's a real diversity within that. So I think that, sometimes we tend to shy away from that. I don't think that we have that luxury anymore. And I think full transparency and representation are the best places to start. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
It did, but it's such a sort of weighted question. If I can just move east a little bit to Chicago, Paul,
Yeah.
any input on that?
Yeah, I think as and I saw Lindsay's pause there, and I kind of my head spun a little bit as well. But for me, going through this last year, I think diversity, equity, and inclusion has become an incredibly important issue. I think it always has, but in the face of the social justice movement, I learned a lot about myself personally, and my partners learned a lot about themselves, and we continue to push the way that we hire, what avenues we go down to hire, and I feel like the constant lack of people, it seems like we're always hunting for people in our restaurants, and it was never like that before. The excuse is always, well, we're just hiring people to fill these positions. But I think the most important thing is that, starting in culinary schools and starting, early in the way we teach how kitchens work and how restaurants work, and changing that for the better is definitely something moving forward that I think has come out of this for our company, and I think it will hopefully change the face of the industry across the country. Yeah, I mean, there's never been any place for hate in any of our kitchens. We don't have any front of the house, back of the house hate. That old school thing that's never occurred. We work together as a team, hopefully to produce something great. But that sentence in and of itself is a cop out. We all have a lot of work to do and a lot of growth to do, and so I think we as a company look forward to that growth. Yeah.
No, and again, it's a heavy question, and I appreciate everyone's candidness, and I know everyone on this call is working the good fight, but I think there are people listening that maybe being in environments where that may not be the case. But if I can just end this topic before we move on to maybe looking forward, Chef Speidel, Champ, I know you hire a lot of Johnson & Wales interns and cooks being in our backyard. It is something that we're instilling so strongly at the university, is this sort of progressive idea that, again, hate has no place. Have you seen a shift in students coming directly out of school, maybe in an internship role or even as a starting professional, where people are more aware of this and it's almost like they won't tolerate it? It's I remember when I was growing up, you just went in, you put your head down, and that was, maybe good for the time, but wrong in the big picture. Do you see a difference in our students? Because you see them right in your backyard.
I do, absolutely. And sometimes you may say, hey kid, you're just a kid, shut up, put your head down and get to work. And then you look back and you think, well, wait a minute, that kid's standing up for themselves. They're standing up for their pay, they're standing up for their hours, they're standing up for what they're doing. And we don't run a pirate ship, and I tell people that this isn't a restaurant you come to because you can't go anywhere else. We're pros. We want to work with other pros, and that's not trying to sound arrogant or take ourselves way too seriously. It's just that's just who we are, and maybe we're just a bunch of nerds, but we don't want that culture. So I like a mix of cooks, but if the culture ever gets too toxic, and there have been times, that misogynistic or bro culture, and those people get squeezed out because it's, they eventually realize there's no there's no market for this here. There's no one's really reacting to that behavior. I'm more and more impressed with the students, especially in Johnson and Wales, and professionalism, sort of a sense of responsibility and a global responsibility. Some do have that old school ethos of coming in, head down, get the work. They don't say a word. Others do. So I'm proud of that. I think that's important. We have nights where, it's not a democracy. We still have to lead and get things done. And maybe we have to speak in a firmer tone. But it's not a constant culture. And I've worked in kitchens where it's a constant culture of fear or intimidation or just overall anxiety. And you're shaking when you're trying to sauce something. You're just not comfortable. And I don't think that's necessary. Obviously we have to take everything very seriously. And sometimes we have to say, hey, let's calm down and get serious. But we haven't seen that as an issue, and certainly not with the students and interns and future employees from Johnson and Wales.
So if I can just sort of piggyback on that and throw a question to Paul, because maybe I just read too much about you and that's my own issue. But I know you prioritize being a mentor almost as much as innovating new food. Now that's a very difficult thing to balance because you want to create the most kumbaya experience in your kitchens, but you also have a job to do. And when you're putting out multiple restaurants with upwards of 900 employees pre-COVID, how do you maintain integrity, maintain focus while still creating this sort of more empathetic culture that we're moving towards and we should be moving towards, but how do you still get the food on the plate the way it should be?
First of all, I'll say with great difficulty. That should just answer the whole question. I think the thing that I often realize is to really mentor and to really work as a team in the kitchen, it actually requires, and maintain quality, I think it requires more work, a lot more work. And I've devoted to myself to that over the years, to really engaging with the teams, and whether it's starting off as a team at the farmers market before work, and just talking about ideas, bouncing things off each other. I get a lot of joy from that. And I think ultimately there's a turning point, and certainly COVID has really, I've done my best not to talk, not to swear during this, but COVID's really messed everything up. The talent pool, our team has been so diluted across the company that there's a ton of work ahead. Feels like, 25 years of work went down the drain. I don't mean to be a downer, but when you work really hard, you work closely with people, build a team of people that operate the same way, that share in the creativity in the kitchen, that where cooks are all working on passion projects, on dishes that you coach them through. That's sort of the environment that we've nurtured for a long time. So the road back is difficult, but it starts with a really strong core team that have worked in our kitchens for a long time. I'm happy to say that we do have a lot of stars in our kitchens that I've worked with tirelessly for a long time. So I just think it's I go back to that it's more work to mentor than just to say, hey, this is the way that I want it done. But I think ultimately the end product is better, the diversity is better. From a selfish standpoint, I just enjoy it a lot more. My greatest joy comes to see that young cook really graduate from a great technical line cook to a chef, somebody that can conceptualize a dish and can think seasonally and get really excited about ingredients. And so I guess ultimately it's a way to foster passion in all the different kitchens all at once. So that's my mentor spiel.
No, and I think we're all better off for hearing that. I think we hope to our students find a place in one of your kitchens or other kitchens where chefs, leaders, restaurateurs have that same mindset. I want to talk about team for a second, and I'm actually sort of pivoting into some of the questions that have come in from our chat. So if it seems like I don't know what I'm saying, it's because I didn't think these up. Lindsay, your team is not just the kitchen, it's the farm as well, especially with Prince. And one thing that I've been passionate about in my adult life, and one thing that we've seen is a huge issue in our industry before COVID, during COVID, and all together, is food waste. If you're growing the food, how is COVID, or what? Can you talk about how important it is for people not to waste those vegetables and not to waste that product that is spent hours nurturing and bringing to the way we need it to be?
Yeah, I mean, quite frankly, I might defer to the chefs on the call about that. They could maybe speak a little bit more to kind of the food waste in the kitchen. But I mean, the one thing about the pandemic that I hate seeing is all the packaging and, you know, the to-go supplies. And that's, I mean, I can't tell you, it really, that there's got to be we've got to solve that. I'm not entirely sure what it is yet. But with the relationship with the farm, sustainability is definitely a really important part of our culture. Everything, all our compost goes back to the farm, except meat. Meat we have to treat differently so that we don't attract animals to the farm, wildlife animals to the farm because of the meat that would be in the soil. So there's a lot of considerations when it comes to composting and how we handle that. I don't, you know, it's hard to say kind of what our food waste is, you know, in terms of percentages, but it's getting better and better and better every year as we get more efficient with composting. At this point, most of our produce for all three restaurants comes from the farm. Depending on the season, we're probably up to about 65%, 65%. We have 25 acres. So it's not, you know, it's not like a little kitchen garden. It's a pretty serious operation. Yeah, but when it comes to like kitchen food waste, as I said, I think that the chefs probably could speak a little bit better to that than I could.
Thank you for that. And I think it's a great segue because Champ, I know that you've always been really passionate about leveraging the great farms around our area to kind of provide the best ingredients for your menus. How are you addressing food waste after COVID, et cetera?
You know, again, we haven't really changed. You know, we try to utilize obviously as many scraps or what we would consider waste as possible in different broths, soups. You know, I'm a butcher by trade, so anything that's not edible, you know, on a whole animal, we'll do whole animal butchery at the restaurant. Is, you know, that's just going to be trash anyway. But all scraps, all trim, that can all be utilized back into the restaurant. So from a food waste, you know, there's always going to be moments. There's always going to be things that get away. I have to echo Lindsay's comment about the to-go containers. That is one thing that's going to come back and bite us in the butt. We're going to have to reckon with that, and it's tough to put, you know, based on availability, you know, some of our products in a large container because that's all we can get, but we need to get it out the door. And I hope they're being recycled. I hope someone's rinsing them off and putting them in the bin, and it's going to that recycling heaven that we all dream about. But you know, our food waste program hasn't changed because of the pandemic. You know, it's been a plan all along. If that answers your question.
No, it does, and I think that, you know, to harken back a little bit to like charging more for food, to put food in better containers that is going to have a lesser impact on the environment costs more money. So I think that people need to consider that as well. Paul, I want to go back real fast. I mean, you said something and I wrote it down in front of me, like we can't mess around with COVID, right? And I know some of the reasons that there were a lot of reasons you decided to close a few of your restaurants, influential pillars of food in the country. Some of them were because people were being unsafe. And, we're not targeting any specific, population of people, but like people who are not necessarily following the guidelines. How important do you feel it is for not only people to get vaccinated, but also your staff? Are you going to, would you consider like making it, this is a really basic question, so a requirement for staff to be vaccinated to work? How would you handle something, a heavy question like that?
Yeah. Well, I mean, to address Blackbird, I think we made that decision because social distancing in our little restaurant, both for staff and for guests, is impossible. And man, I'm was so excited to hear what you and Michael have done, Lindsay. Moving Quince to the country, that would have never even entered my mind. So that's brilliant. I don't know that we could do that in Chicago with our weather and stuff, but it was really a decision of necessity. We can't make we can't insist that our staff be vaccinated, but because of the pivot in our company to massive amounts of wholesale food production, we were able to get our entire staff approved for vaccinations in Chicago. And I think I don't have the exact statistic, but everybody in our butcher shop, everybody in our bakery, they're all vaccinated or on their way to being fully vaccinated, and a lot of our employees are well on their way. We're in Chicago. We're a blue state. And of course, with all the partisan politics, all the people in blue states get vaccinated. So I think the entire staff will get vaccinated. That was a joke, but I really believe the majority, if not all of our staff, will get vaccinated. There's no doubt in my mind. So if I could make it mandatory, I would, but no, I actually wouldn't. People have to make that decision. But yeah, there is no messing around. The whole thing. I don't know if it's over yet. I mean, it feels really nice to open up and to, I saw on the news what's going on with spring break in Florida, and it's just incredible. It's been just a year for the record books, a year or more. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
it does. And I mean, it's a tough question as a restaurateur, and I think you answered it like you weighed all the options, and that was really great. So thank you. But you did say, you mentioned the word spring, and if we're going to look forward and we're going to be optimistic, which I think we need to do, but also with a level of caution, because we don't want to get back to where we started. Spring is here. People are getting the vaccine. I got my shot on Sunday. People are going to go indoors, and I'm going to go back to Lindsay on this because you push this to the chefs with food waste. The dining room has been your baby for so long. Are you going to change your philosophy of how you set up a dining room? I know we talked about how more outdoor dining, but like, how does that change your philosophy and what is ingrained in your ethos for years now? How does that look different for you?
Yeah, I've given this a lot of thought. I mean, how much do you design for COVID? And I think I've decided that I'm going to make some big changes because of COVID. Or COVID has caused me to rethink, reconceive space and its implications actually for labor. It's been actually a really interesting exercise. For Quince, we were, Quince was like a socially distanced restaurant before I had ever even heard the term. There's like 10 feet between tables. So we're, it'd be well enough, we could leave Quince well enough alone, but I'm actually, I've decided I want to kind of take out about a third of the restaurant and create kind of an interior, exterior space, a kind of covered patio terrace, for a number of reasons, but I think it is a nod to designing for COVID, and we will still keep, the socially distanced tables on the interior. but, you know, kind of actually looping back to like Paul's point of a moment ago about indoor dining, we made a decision that we won't return to indoor dining until the staff is vaccinated. And similar to Paul's story, and in San Francisco, restaurant workers actually are eligible for vaccinations. And most, I would say we're probably at 80% of our employees kind of well on their way for full vaccination. We haven't experienced a lot of hesitancy, so we didn't really have to think about kind of, you know, setting up kind of any rules or guidelines around that. People seem to be very accepting and willing of the vaccines. But I think for anyone who didn't want to get a vaccine, you know, maybe they would just, you know, we would keep them, give them the opportunity just to work outside and maybe not work indoor dining until they were comfortable to do so. That, you know, maybe that's maybe one way of thinking about it. We actually own the building that Quince and Cattonia are in. For those of you who may not know, they're kind of adjacent operations. And we went through the expense of upgrading the building's HVAC and putting in, you know, the science on it is maybe not, you know, not 100% solid, but we went ahead and did it and put in kind of all this new systems to upgrade the ventilation, airflow, PSIs, you know, in the kitchens, in the dining rooms, upstairs in the office to improve the air quality throughout the building. For Cattonia, we're actually going to have to change the floor plan if we want to accommodate outdoor dining and indoor dining and to go and delivery. I mean, it's, you know, you're really looking at how to use your space quite differently. And the point about kind of designing for COVID and its implications for labor too, and the cost of labor, that adds a whole nother layer. And that when we do redesign Quince, I want to do it in such a way that we can design it and lay it out so that it actually reduces the number of positions required to provide service, you know, from a front of the house perspective, which is really hard to do, like in a 3-star Michelin kind of context. But I think that because labor will continue to be more and more scarce, we've got to figure out how to run that restaurant with less front of the house labor. And, you know, there's some interesting ways to do it, but it's something that we're actively trying to solve for at the moment. So that kind of encompasses a couple different things, and I think, but.
I love it. I love it. Thank you. No, but as we talk about change, I mean, we've had to make a lot of changes, and, you know, myself included, like, you know, the way that we teach culinary education is evolved as well. I mean, we're training for innovation now, and we're training sort of at the core of what the new college of food innovation and technology is. So if I can be a little greedy, what should I teach students? I'm asking all three of you, what's the most important lesson that my students should learn coming out of culinary school? I'll start with Champ and then maybe just go around to Paul and then Lindsay again. Champ, what should I be teaching my students?
You know, the value of what everyone's been talking about, the value of a foundation, you know, the value of mastering those initial skills, learning how to work with purpose and intent, the old sense of urgency. Students need to understand that it is a lot of repetition. And that's important, and they have to enjoy that. They have to enjoy, you know, each day. You're doing it again and again, and obviously trying to do a little bit better and be a little bit quicker, a little faster, a little execute much better. That's more philosophy than actually teaching. But that foundation, you really have to have that core. And as an instructor, I think you need to judge them and see if they really have that passion. Is this something that student is going to excel in? Do they have that spark, that fire behind their eyes? Do they have that desire to do this? You know, we've all been doing it a long time, and you know, obviously we have our good days and our bad days, but I still love to do it. I still love to peel things and cut things into little pieces, and I still love the butcher. It's my favorite thing in the world. And it's meditative. Now, can you see that in a young student? I don't know. But it's a two-way street. You guys have to find that in the students. And that student has to hear it from you, what it takes to be a good cook.
And that starts with this conversation that we're having right now. Paul, when a student shows up at your door, an intern, a young cook, and knowing the great mentor and teacher that you are, what should they have in their, theoretical or cognitive toolkit besides sharp knives when they show up at your restaurant asking for a job?
Yeah, I mean, Champ definitely hit on it. I mean, it's number one, it's passion. I mean, I think the question of why are you doing this is really important to a young cook or to anyone in our business. And for me, it 100% is about passion for me as a chef. I'm passionate about putting my hands in the dirt, about gardening. I'm passionate about where everything comes from in our restaurants. So that's number one for me. I think as you asked what you should teach those people. And for me, I think there's a certain amount of pressure on us as teachers and as leaders in the country right now to openly address the issues that we're up against, whether it be in our industry, whether it be addressing systemic racism in America and diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think that's what we do as leaders. That's how we can actually institute great change in our country. So that's really important. And I think for me, the most important thing that I try to do with every single employee is to help them become a good person. I mean, that's the number one goal for me. So if you can, send people into our industry that are passionate, that are good, understanding people, that are concerned about the problems in the world and want to help change those by opening a great restaurant that treats people incredibly fairly and comes up with new ideas as to how to pay people more equitably. Those are all things that'll change our industry and ultimately change our world. And so that's my list.
No, it's a powerful message. Lindsay, you've seen firsthand the level of rigor and intensity that it takes to work in a 3 Michelin star restaurant. Assuming some student wants to subject themselves to that environment, which is a very rewarding environment in its own right, what do they need to know before knocking on the door at Quince?
Well, I don't want to sound, what Paul and Champe said prior. I mean, it really does start with passion. I mean, I think you have to ask someone what excites them, what do they want to learn, when they come to work, what are they looking forward to doing the most? And kind of, there's almost like a rudimentary quality to it. And it has to be very foundational as to what kind of self-reward they get from what they're going to do. And then you can build on that, I think, with really good education and a really strong culture that, that values a food culture, that values kindness. I think, the one thing that maybe we've all had a little bit more time this year to really think about our own company's culture and really make a point of sitting down and doing the exercise of really articulating what that culture is and really living in that culture and being able to articulate that culture and, be able to, present it to someone and says, okay, well, if this looks like you, if it, smells like you, if this is the kind of people that you want to work with, then this is the right place for you to come and join us. And then we'll do our absolute best to support you in what you want to learn and encourage you to take some chances. One of the truly remarkable things for us this year has been the level of trust that our management team that we have felt from them, because we've asked them to do some pretty crazy things this year. I mean, really kind of crazy things. And, that you could see that kind of scratch their head a bit, but they trusted us to kind of get the businesses through this year, to get all of us as a team through this year. And I don't think that trust, and I think that that's something that we don't talk enough about really trusting one another and trusting the process. And I think trust is really important, as is passion. And having very kind of honest conversations about kind of people's where they want to go and what they want to do. And I always look to hire people who want to open up their own restaurants, who want to become their own chef owners, or there are very few women restaurateurs in the industry. So I particularly make an effort to mentor young women that come through. You can really count them on one hand how many women restaurateurs there are. So I think, I think representation is, and I mentioned it earlier, I think that's also a very important aspect of it.
Thank you for sharing that. And we're coming up on the end of our conversation, and I think that the takeaway from all three of your responses was passion and just a willingness to, and what I took from it is a willingness to learn and a willingness to express your own passions and then find people that are going to help bring you to the finish line or get you going in the right direction. If I can just do maybe a 10-second response from each person about what you think people should look forward to in the future. What should they be inspired by, and what should they be excited about? Just almost like that, like 2 word response to put you guys on the spot. Champ, can I throw you on there? What do people have to look forward to in the upcoming year?
As far as food goes, I think, they have to look forward to everything. They, we're back. We'll be back. I'm sorry. We'll be back. We'll all be back. And, and I think people have that to look forward to is all their favorite restaurants across this country and across the world will be back. And we've kept fighting. We've kept doing the things that we do. If anything, we've all gotten more efficient, but I don't think anyone anywhere has dropped the ball on quality. And I do think diners, and myself included, are dying to get back into restaurants. And so we will be back.
Thank you for sharing.
That's what you have to look forward to.
Paul and Lindsay, 1 word. What's the future going to hold for us?
1 word.
I know it's a lot, right? I'm running out of time.
I got 2. Human interaction is the big one. Really, really jonesing for that. And the other one is relates to that, but it's an ice cold beer at a tavern.
Oh my God! Please.
sorry.
I'm on a plane to Chicago right now. We're going to do that.
Yeah.
Lindsay, 1 or 2 words. What do you look forward to in the future?
A healthier industry. I think this is an opportunity for us to really the model was a little bit broken, and we now have an opportunity to really re-examine it and innovate and address some very long-standing issues.
Thank you for that.
I think it'll be a happier place.
Thank you so much.
Well said.
All of you for sharing. We touched on so much. We could talk for hours. I know you guys are extremely busy, so I want to thank you so much for taking the time. We really appreciate your insight and your expertise and your leadership as we evolve food to be a better place. With that, I want to conclude this panel and turn back over to the Dean of the College of Food Innovation and Technology, Jason Evans. Thank you again so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chef Britt. And what a great opportunity to have this conversation with some real leaders in this industry. So to close tonight, I really want to extend a sincere thanks to our keynote speakers, Emeril Lagasse and Sanchez, our panelists, Lindsay, Tusk, Paul Kahan, and Champe Speidel, and our moderators and the leaders of the FIT Symposium, Chef TJ Deladon and Chefs Matthew Britt and Wyatt McGuire, and of course, all of the staff here at JWU who helped to keep the engine running and make this evening happening. As we continue to find innovative ways to support and advance these industries that we love, We respectfully ask that you consider supporting our students, many of whom are with us virtually tonight and who aspire to careers in food. If you're in a position to do so, please consider making a gift. We're going to share the link for giving via email, and your donation will provide scholarship and financial aid support directly to CFIT students, allowing them to pursue their passions at Johnson & Wales and position themselves as leaders in the food industry. We really appreciate your consideration. This was a wonderful evening. I'm so proud to be a part of the JWU College of Food Innovation and Technology family. And we certainly look forward to the opportunity to get together in person next year, spring of 2022, for the second annual FIT Symposium. Thank you everyone again, and have a wonderful evening.